Welcome to First Sundays with Black Poet Laureates, a podcast of the National Black Poet Laureate Society. I am your host, Rhea Carmon, Executive Director of the Society. Each month on the first Sunday, we will celebrate the voices, visions, and verses of Black Poet Laureates across the United States. These are the poets who carry the weight and the honor of their communities, their stories, and who transform the ordinary into extraordinary. These are the poets that remind us that poetry is not just an art form. It's a lifeline, a mirror, and a beacon. The National Black Poet Laureate Society is dedicated to amplifying the work of Black Poet Laureates, fostering community among these poets and poetry lovers, and ensuring the rich tradition of Black poets. There's excellence through this organization, and it continues to thrive as we have more and more Black Poet Laureates joining our ranks. Through our anthology series, which is In the Fullness of the Word, our annual conferences, and conversations like the one we're about to have, we will continue to build a living archive of Black Poet Laureate brilliance. Today, I'm honored to be in conversation with the one and only Dr. Natalie Graham. Well, Natalie, let's dive in and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Wonderful. I am born and raised in Gainesville, Florida. And so for folks who don't think Florida's the South, I'm definitely Southern. It's more than Miami and Orlando. Um, both my parents were farmers, or lived on farmland. And so I think that when I think about who I am and where I'm from, it always goes back to that sensibility of family and the love and the struggle that they endured and gave to me. So right now, I am the head of Africana Studies at the University of Tennessee. I'm working on a novel and a new collection of poems. And also, I'm really interested in developing opportunities to connect with museums and artwork for poets and artists.
I love that you mentioned that because I'm definitely going to want to tap into that a little bit. I had the wonderful pleasure of doing an ekphrastic program with you in 2025. It doesn't seem like that was that
It
long
does not.
ago,
Yeah.
but it was almost a year ago.
Yeah. It
And
could.
that's the crazy part. But let's see. Um, Tell us a little bit about the work that you did while you were Poet Laureate. I know that you are Poet Laureate Emerita, and
Mhm.
just tell us a little bit about that work.
Sure. So I was the poet laureate of Orange County, California. And so it really inspired the work that I'm interested in doing with museums and ekphrastic work, because as part of that, I was deeply motivated to connect with both libraries and museums. I think that those are vital spaces for communities that don't always feel accessible and central to who we are.
Mm,
And so one of the things I did is I worked with the Orange County Museum of Art, and I did a series of ekphrastic workshops with them based on the collections that they had. And I also wrote poems in response to those collections. And I like to compare, I like to combine both ekphrastic poetry and some other form. So I think a lot of times people don't, even when they're looking at a painting, they don't necessarily know how to start the
mm,
poem in
right.
response to it. So I might take a painting as a subject and then ask poets to write a poem that's a found poem based on like the first three pages of a novel. And so
Oh,
that's an
okay.
example of something that we did in the workshop. So they kind of learn how two forms or two like, genres or types of forms work together. And so we did that as well. We did a series of tanka, and then some work with, like I said, the found poem. The idea a little, I guess maybe a twist on the found poem where we take those first three pages as a dictionary and sort of pretend like those are the only words in the world that we know. And then we can kind of arrange and play with them in any manner that we want. But just
Mm,
thinking of that confined body of words that might feel a little bit like strange because they're not words that we would readily grab when we're writing poetry. And I
Right.
think that toggling, that movement, the journey that we kind of have to travel using something that might feel a little bit foreign to us initially, I think is part of the interesting puzzle of it that I really enjoy. It really takes me back.
Yeah. I love that exercise. I think I might actually practice it the next time I sit down to write. It's just I've never thought about doing a found poem with only, one page of a math book.
Mhm.
Like that sounds awesome to me because I'm a
Yeah.
math person. So I'm like, oh, okay, I can
Yeah.
see how I could come up with something brand spanking new
Yeah.
that I would
Yeah.
probably fall in love with if if I did it.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's awesome. Okay. So I would like to know a little bit about your journey from
Mm.
California
Yeah.
to Tennessee. Tennessee's
Sure.
very different from California,
Yeah.
and being a part of Africana Studies
Hmm.
right now in
Hmm.
a state where mentioning diversity
Hmm.
can, get you in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah.
Like, without, you having to go too deep because we know.
Hmm.
Um, just tell me a little bit about that journey and maybe like the mental space
Mm.
that it puts you in, that type of, idea.
Yeah, I think that for better or worse, I was raised by parents who didn't feel like America was theirs. And so
Mm,
this sense of like being in a place where you're a renter and not an owner, that's kind of how like my parents raised me to be sort of on my toes,
mm,
not thinking that this is like my space, not feeling like I can sink in, whether it's the academy, whether it's like a classroom. And
mm.
really, for the most part, I had all Black community spaces. Like on the weekends, my life was all Black. On the weekdays, my life was all white. So I'd be the only
Oh,
Black student in all of my classrooms, K through 12. But all the weekends, it would be church, it would be my cousin's house, it would be,
mm-hmm.
back in the backwoods. And so I think that like, again, that being able to, find my way to feel at home in myself in both of those spaces, I think prepared me a little bit for um, both the experience of being at UT and the experience of really being in Orange County. So Orange County, California, is 2% Black. So I think a
Mm,
lot of people think of California as this bastion of progressive,
yeah.
ideology. But really, if you look at that county in particular, it has a very kind of troubling history of sundown towns,
Oh,
neo-Nazi
wow.
rallies. Like the first 2 years I was there were neo-Nazi rallies down, people in
Wow.
full regalia walking down the streets. And so thinking about like, what does place mean? I think that like troubled the idea of like a safe place for me. And so I think a lot of the ways that, and not to say that Knoxville isn't a challenging space for Black people, like it really is. It has
Hmm.
its own history and its own challenge. But the challenges feel very familiar to me here. And it
I
feels
got
very
you.
much very similar to, my experience growing up in Gainesville, and I
Hmm.
think a lot of it I truly do believe, I believe in imagination. I believe in the power of imagination as like the engine of our hope. And so I think that
Yeah.
it's very easy to feel like a place doesn't have anything for us,
Hmm.
um, because we have evidence that says that's the case. Like we have
Wow.
historical
Yeah.
evidence that says that's true. So like why it makes the most sense to believe that. But I think that as writers and as creatives, that's where we become social justice advocates because we
Yeah.
can imagine a space of flourishing. Like we can sit
Mm,
here in this space of like, looking around and seeing the houses or seeing the neighborhoods or seeing like what used to be, and we can like imagine what can be in like expansive and vast ways. And so I think that's what I really try to continue to go back to I tell people a lot of times, like I just for a long time, like when anybody would ask me a question about how I was feeling about the state or the university or just the state of higher education, I would say like I'm focused and hopeful because it's
Mm,
like, I've probably said it to you before, but like I've gotten so much value out of Toni Morrison's quote that the primary function of racism is distraction. Like that's the primary, like if like I just feel like there's a real danger and threat, right? There's true, I
hmm.
mean, physical danger, right? It's not
Yes.
just like ideology, it's not just thought danger, it's not just hurting our feelings, but there's a true physical threat that we face every day. That's the reality. But I think also at the same time, like our joy and our peace and our love for each other are the most vulnerable and the most powerful parts of ourselves in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
And I think if we can protect those, we can build communities where we take care of each other. And there's power in that. I know I may often sound naive, but I'm like, how many people does it take to make a city wonderful? Like, it's like you're talking about two handfuls. Like
Right.
you
It
need
doesn't
those
take much.
10 great people, and you're walking
Mm,
through the streets like you're a king. It's like, yeah, like this person might say something or that person might do something, but I'm like, I have a squad that I can call that's
right.
like, you know, let's, Voltron, this thing. Like we're not alone in this. So I think that like as much as like I don't want to discount the challenges and the difficulty, I think the solution is always going to be one that we have access to because it's each other. We
Yeah.
are the solution to whatever the challenges are.
Wow. That is absolutely beautiful, which almost everything you say is. So I'm never surprised at the way you think and the way you phrase things in such a way that it becomes a teachable moment
Mm,
for how to stretch ourselves.
mm,
So in your book,
hmm.
begin with a failed body.
Yeah.
You talk about the body is fragile,
Hmm.
right? And um, where where did that idea come from? And
Mm,
then how did you center your poetry all
mm.
in that space?
That idea comes from, again, it goes back to my mother. So my mother had multiple sclerosis. And so
Mm,
as long as I can remember I never have memories of her walking without assistance.
wow.
So like and so I talk about in I think it might be in this collection or another one, like I talk about the idea that like the illness was so loomed so large in my memory that like she was walking and healthy up until I was like 10, but I have no memories of her walking. So
Wow.
like every memory that I had before the age of 10, it's like her in a car or her behind something. Like my brain can't call it up. So this
Hmm.
idea of, so I'm just saying that to say like that her illness loomed large and I was her primary caretaker from middle school through college, going to college. And so I think that like, um, that experience for me made it like just bone deep, like this idea that like no matter how quote unquote broken we are,
Hmm.
and no matter how like we fail against some model of perfection or goodness, like we still can begin. Like you still start the day. Like you still move forward in life and like you don't just like give up. And I think that
Hmm.
that's that I feel like we're in a time that's so polarizing
Hmm.
that like makes people feel like if they're not perfect, then they shouldn't even try. They shouldn't even participate in the public discourse, or if they don't really have things together, then they're going to be shut down.
Yeah.
And so I think that like I learned so much from my mother because she never she never talked about her life as small.
Ah.
I mean, she couldn't walk for 40 years of her life. She never talked about like opportunities and things that she couldn't do. She she always tried to think about what's the next thing I can do and how can I help somebody? Like she
Wow.
was really like, I really want to help people be healthier. Like I really want to, she had
Mm-hmm.
this idea. One of the reasons why I study cookbooks now is 'cause she had this idea like she wanted to make a cookbook of soul food recipes that were like healthy. And so she had this idea of like healthy versions of soul food, heart healthy.
Oh
And so I
yeah.
think that like this idea of like the failed body, or we say like a body that is ill, that is sick, that is,
Mm-hmm.
ugly, that is not part of like, whatever our standard model is in the external society, like that's not the end. And so there's always something beautiful in things
Mm.
that are like broken or not quite, you know, aligned with whatever the standard is. And like I think that
Mm.
um that was a primary motivation because it's always like, man, like this person who has a quote unquote failed body. And she did talk about her body as something that failed her. She talked
Yeah.
about her body
Mm-hmm.
as something like out, like she was kind of like, this is just like a case for my mind and my intellect and my, it's
Mm-hmm.
not like the primary thing. And so I think that it's also part of the way I'm curious about how we move around in the world, what capacity we have to love our bodies and love ourselves, regardless of how they perform for us. So I think that
Yeah.
that's also like something. It really comes from my mother. I think a little bit like more broadly, I would say too, the other thing I think a lot about is like images of the South. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the South is a failed body in the context of America.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
It's like we have this body of the South where like, the Confederacy got it wrong. They got it
Yeah.
dead wrong.
Dead
And so
wrong.
it's like there's no going back from that. And so what do you do when like you're the epic failure of the nation, And
Wow.
then like, but then it's like when you look at Chicago and New York and LA, it's not like black people are like knocking it out of the park in those cities either.
Oof.
So,
Come on now.
so, so I think like this idea that the South is like this place of horror for Black folks because it is. We have all the ghosts are in the South.
Yes.
But it's like, but then what? When we think about it a little more deeply, we're like, where's our power at? Where are people at? Where are the mayors at?
Mm.
Where's the senators at? It's like those places, that's, Maryland, Georgia, so I think that like there's this complex idea, I think, especially when I think about racial past and racial history and racial present,
Mm-hmm.
where we're moving. Like, I think that like there's also that idea of like begin, like have the energy to say, like, it doesn't matter, like wherever we are starting at, that's okay. Like,
That's
it's
okay.
okay,
Yeah.
because you can outpace anybody. Like that, and I think that's like the sort of like when
That's
I think
good.
about how I identify with the southernness, that's the thing because I mean I've been in spaces, I think my first, and I'll just say this and finish, now I'm rambling. But like
No, you're good.
my first summer at Cave Canem, I felt very much like, oh man, like these are like the fancy poets. These are like New York, Chicago. They're slick, they urban, like they look good, like they got their hair done. Like I'm just like this raggedy, like, dirty South. Like I'm just like, how do I even compete or even fit
Mm.
into this mold or model? And I think that I was like, oh, like what I love about what I loved about that space was that I learned how vast the Black community is.
Yeah.
And like that was the first time where I was like, oh wait, like we all fit in here. Like we all go together. Like so I think that that was like a sweet, like, just like development really early in my poetic life and my life
Mm-hmm.
as a person. So yeah, I think that those are the two things that are most resonant for me when I think about begin with a begin with a failed body. Like you just every day you just begin again. Like whether it's physical, mental, intellectual, what feels like failure, what might literally be failure. And I think we have this idea that we're afraid, I think, in this moment to say like you failed. Like you messed
Mm.
up. And it's
Yeah.
just true. Like I think that to me,
And
I
that's
always want
okay.
to be okay with being like, yeah, I'm not afraid of failure. I'm not afraid of saying, oh, you know what? I
Yes.
I messed up. I messed up and I'm sorry. But like I'm gonna begin again. I'm gonna start over.
Yeah.
And so I
I
think that that's
think that's what I noticed when I was in the K-12 classroom the most
Hmm.
is that students didn't want to fail, right? They didn't want
Hmm.
to have those
Yeah,
moments where
right.
they messed up.
Yep.
And so many of them would not begin for the
Hmm.
fear of
Hmm.
failure.
Yep.
And so, as a math teacher, I encourage them, it's okay. Like you learn math through the failures, right?
Hmm.
That's how you have to do it. So you
Yep.
have to start. I would have students that would raise their hand before they even began the problem. I don't know
Hmm.
how to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yes.
you have not tried. You
Try.
haven't
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
haven't
Yeah. Yeah.
begun, right? You
Right.
haven't
Yeah.
begun. And even
Exactly.
if your beginning is wrong, you still got to do it. And
That's right.
so I think that that's, part of what I see as an educator is
Hmm.
encouraging people to do just that to begin, even though failure might be an option. Like
Yeah.
you might mess it
Yeah.
up. So
Yeah.
what
I
comes
love math in
first?
that way. Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I do. So what comes
That,
first? Does the title begin with a failed body come first, or do the poems lead you to the title?
oh, the poems all day. Like I think
Hmm.
I mean, I was one of those people who I learned everything the hard way. Like I learned everything after the fact. And so I went to kind of Cave Canem. I got my master's in fine arts and I didn't even think that I was good enough to submit poems to I felt like after that I needed to go get my PhD in order to be you know, relevant. I
Wow.
think like that my sort of academic trajectory was undergrad, MFA right after undergrad. I mean, I was probably 22 when I got my MFA, something really young. And then I didn't submit poems for another 10 years. So all of
I still don't submit poems like I
I
should.
I got yeah, it's the best thing. I think about it now. I think a lot more about submission as community building and connection.
Hmm.
Um, But then I was just like, it was so foreign to me. It was so, and I was in it, and I went to an MFA program, which I don't think it was necessarily a bad thing, but we didn't talk about the profession of poetry.
Why?
So
Okay.
we didn't talk about we didn't talk about different workshops. Nobody mentioned Cave Canem while I was in my MFA. There was never. So I think that all of these things were very much after the fact, and I was like, oh, this all feels so separate from actually writing a poem. And so I
Mm,
think that when I submitted my collection of poems, I wasn't thinking about the collection. I didn't think this is a collection. I was
got
never
you.
writing towards a collection because that would feel too egotistic. How dare I think I could write a book? I can write a poem, but I can't write a book. And so I think until I got the first book, I never thought in terms of a book. I only thought in terms of
Wow.
one particular poem at a time.
One poem at a time. And
Hmm.
you mentioned Cave Canem a couple of times.
Hmm.
So at the time that you went to Cave Canem, had you already been a poet laureate, or
No,
no, you hadn't even made that journey yet? Do you
no.
think it is something that a current or past poet laureate should be a part of, even though, I guess people tend to think of being a poet laureate as like, the top, like, oh,
Mm.
you've reached your maximum.
Hmm.
Like, how do you feel about still learning after
Oh, that's
that
such a good
process?
question. That's such a good question. I mean, I've been in every week this year I've been in a workshop. I'm going to a workshop on Monday. I take all the workshops I can because I think that there's no we're in a dynamic world where
Hmm.
things are moving, moving, moving. So it's like the idea that saying that we've achieved something and then maybe something else becomes less relevant. I don't think that's the case. And I think that what I do believe is true about Cave Canem is that it changes because the people in it change. So it's
Mm,
something different now than 20 years ago, assuredly. 10
right.
years ago for sure. So I think that that to me feels really really vital. And the reality is it's very privileged to be able to say, don't worry about the professional, like the professionalism is not the main thing. Like
Mm.
worry about connecting to poets who believe in the work of poetry and the craft.
Ooh.
And like because like that's the thing. Like we're not here, nobody got into poetry to make money. So it's like we're not out here. So it's
We didn't
like
start thinking that
that
way.
it's not,
No.
yeah, like who you might have five, and so and they're probably teachers too. So it's like, so I think that like I love learning. I'm
Mm.
curious about everything. I want to
Yeah.
know how, engines work. Like I'm not just, interested in connecting to Cave Canem to put a line on my CV or like being a
Mm.
poet laureate to like achieve as an achievement. I think that every single thing I get, it's like that, each one teach one. Like everything I get gives me a different platform and opportunity to connect to people, to enrich
Mhm.
myself, and to turn that right back into, enriching someone else. Like we're
Love it.
here to build community. Like that's to me, poems are a vehicle for connection.
I
So it's
love
like
it.
if I can like send a little poem out to somebody and they grab it and they say, huh, like this is cool, but like it's not just about like the exercise of language. It's about
Hmm.
a person.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what it's about. Because otherwise, it's just like have the robots make the poems. Like we don't
Oh
need,
gosh, no, please
we
don't.
don't, we don't, we don't need like somebody just like it's really about connection. And
It
that to me
is.
is that's the thing I'm always gonna, and that's what Cave Canem is. Cave Canem is a network of people.
I
It's
love that.
not you get to learn, you get to grow, but you make my best friends. Like my son calls Cave Canem fellows auntie because those are the
I love it.
people who, they were there when he was born. They were
Yeah.
in my life then. So I think that like it to me, it's really about community as much as it's about, it doesn't mean it's like not a real professional network either. I mean, it's a top shelf legit thing. But I think like as much as we can like lean into authentic connection
Hmm.
and lean away from like, corporate professional development or like feeling like we've arrived, like I think we're all better for it.
I love that. All right, Doc, it is time. Will you please share a poem with us?
Sure. So I talked a bit about family, and so I'm gonna read one of my favorite poems, actually. Um, and it's interesting. Sometimes poems are like, it's like the favorite poem. It's not necessarily the poem that makes you happy. It's like the poem that does a particular work you need to do. And so this poem is about my grandfather who raised rabbits for animal testing. And he was a hard man. He was a very hard man. Um, he was a man who did not believe in mincing words. He was violent in some ways. But I think that like all that to be said, my mother wouldn't be here without him. I wouldn't be here without him. So I think that like that complexity, I think is also I'm always holding both of those things in my mind as I think about him in this poem. Raised for testing. Gray dirt snaked under a covering of trees. The descent felt steeper, turning off the last highway in town, how the path to the old house sunk down, and dirt rose on both sides, cut with black roots. Every summer, our tan Jeep, down on a dirt snake, wound its way toward the old farmer, the icebox, the washboard, the outhouse, the tin tub, and the rabbits. Past the sagging house, through the gate, the yard opens to what should be wilderness, but is just more sky and the long rabbit house. The old farmer talks about cotton money, coal money, railroad money, and rabbit money. You only enjoy the dollar you spend, and the best dollars, rabbit dollars. The feed bag drags another snake behind us. In the rows of steel cages, hundreds of rabbits thump soundlessly, soundless except for the thumping, the rattling cages, the scratching, the cages not quite rattling, but quivering. If they hissed or squealed, I don't remember their rabbit noises, just their mouths quivering and their cages almost rattling and them thumping their jumpless limbs, and the machine of cages quivering and scraping together. So that is raised for the testing.
Every time I hear you read a poem, I hear these intricate things um, that you said in the workshop that you did with us in April
Hmm
about, and I that just always comes up every time I'm writing now, is it is because you say it is. And
hmm
like I think that was the key phrase I took away from that whole night.
Yeah.
And I've found myself just like saying some crazy things in a poem, and then when I read it back I'm like, oh, it is because I said it is.
hmm
I wrote a poem for a little girl today,
hmm
and I said she was bright as the pink sunshine.
hmm
And she loved that line because her
Yeah,
favorite color was pink. And
that's right.
so she was just like, oh my goodness, thank you so much. Just, and I was like,
Yeah, yeah,
okay, it is because I said it is,
yeah.
but it also
That's it.
connected with her. And that just,
Mm,
I find myself now taking more chances just
mm.
because of that one phrase that stuck with me so
hmm
much, taking more chances
I love
in
that.
the way that I'm describing the things that are in my poem, and just like kind
Hmm
of just open myself up. So, kudos to
hmm
you and thank you for
Thank you.
always, teaching. Um, and I love what you said about just kind of always learning. And that is
Hmm
something that we have to do as poets, as poet laureates.
hmm
And we did not start writing because we thought we were going to get rich. So
Yeah,
that is
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. You have spoken before
Mhm.
about rhetoric that can injure and isolate us.
Mm,
Um, but poets can remind, uh, but poets remind us that words can mend and revive.
hmm
With what we're dealing with, just like inflation, the
Yeah.
social climate. I had I had an elderly lady stop today because I guess this is the Republican primary, and to cast a vote, you have to sign a document that says you are a dedicated Republican. Like you can't
Mm.
even
A
vote right
loyalty
now
statement. Yeah.
without saying this is who you are. And she was so frustrated with it. She was like, I'm not
hmm
Republican, I'm not Democrat. I just want to vote for the best person.
Yeah.
And they forced me to sign this document
Yeah.
just to cast my vote in this primary.
Yeah.
And basically what it has done is it's made it so that somebody could be in office for 10, 15 years
hmm
because people don't want to sign this document.
hmm
And even if a better Republican comes along, you can't even vote for them unless you agree
Yeah.
that you're going to always be a Republican. And
Yeah.
so she was like, Rhea, this is just so hard. She's like, I just want people to vote and you have to sign this
hmm
document. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to sign that document either.
hmm
So, the person who's been in office for the last 10 years and jacking things up is going to stay in office.
Yeah.
But so all of that to be said, like, how does your idea about
hmm
us being able to use our words to mend and revive
hmm
really come alive and speak to this climate that we're dealing with?
That's so good. I mean, I think that I think there's so many things that are swirling in my mind, but I think one of the things that I think of is we have to be willing. Okay, I'm trying to have the train slow down. Like,
I
that,
know there was a lot. There was a whole
yeah,
lot
yeah,
in
yeah.
there. It was
No, but
like, that was a loaded one.
I might be getting this wrong, so I invite people to look it up. But I think there's like a Shirley Chisholm quote that is like unbossed and unbothered or something like that. She's like, I'm unbossed. Like that idea of being of having a line in the sand that says, this is what I'm not going to do. This is what I'm not going to do. Like I'm not going to compromise my integrity for anyone. My integrity is about myself and my dignity
Hmm.
and my family. I wouldn't call my family out a name for any amount of money. I could be, there's nothing that you could do to me to make me say something bad about my son. So I think that having those lines in our lives and really being
Hmm.
willing to meditate on that a little bit, because you kind of, it's easy to say, right? But I
Mhm.
think to really be like, no, this is where it stops and this is why. I'm not going to fake for anyone or lie for anyone. And the stakes are this. And if that means I lose my job, I lose my job. Because my first job was
Wow.
at Publix. And if I have to go back to Publix again, that's where I'll be. Like,
Going
like,
back to Publix, but
listen,
drawing that
like,
hard line in the sand. Yeah, absolutely.
it's like I think that like really finding like, okay, what's the worst you could do to me? What? And so like and playing that out. I mean, it's a catastrophizing sort of exercise, but saying like, I think it's important for us to say like, what are the risks here? Because the risks are there.
Yeah.
So I think it's true that like, yeah, well, that means well, you can't engage in a certain type of politics if you're not willing to sign that line. So what do you do instead? How do you create
Mm.
communities instead that help protect the people that maybe the politician is supposed to or charged to protect? Like, how do we improve our communities without having to compromise our values, our dignity, and our humanity? And I think just broadly, that's where we're. I mean, we that's kind of always been the thing, but we can look back in every era and say like there were people in every era who said this is not right, and they were in the minority. MLK was in the minority. Like
It
most people
was.
didn't want to end segregation. Now we have a whole holiday, and everybody's like volunteer for MLK. Everybody loves MLK now, but
But that
like,
then.
but not then. And so I think having this idea of like, this is the line in the sand, what I won't do. And then also like equally what I'm willing to do and be
Yeah.
intentional. Like every month I'm like, I need to go, I'm new to Knoxville. I feel quite new here still. And like every month I'm like, I'm gonna go somewhere different. I'm gonna go to an event. I'm gonna get outside. I'm gonna meet some people. I'm gonna feel awkward and outside, but like
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna do it because like I want to be known and I want to know people. I don't want
Yeah.
to be like this mysterious, person. Like I want to actually know people and what their needs are so we can like have mutually beneficial relationships.
Yes.
Like that again, like it kind of goes back to I really do believe in the power of people. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like families and things that look like families. Like that's all it is. That's the only thing we have. We have families and things that look like families. And like sometimes work might look like a family, but a lot of times it doesn't.
Yeah.
So it's like
Lord knows that's the
really,
truth.
yeah, building those relationships that are like meaningful, sincere, and authentic. Because I need to be like, I really don't mess around too much with people who I can't call when I'm in need. Like I can't have it like those people in my circle if I'm like, yeah, like I need to be able to, and you need to be able to call me. Like I think that that's
Yes.
kind of like that's how we have not just endured every age, but like really made progress in every age. And I
Mm-hmm.
think like if we're relying on United States government, the local government, an institution that was created before 1920. Like, I think that we're kind of expecting a lot from things that weren't made to serve those needs.
No, they were
So I
made to
think
serve
that, like,
themselves.
if
Systems that were made to serve
yeah, we
themselves.
have to
Yeah.
right size that expectation. Like, again, like
Mm.
I grew, like it goes back to my parents. Like, I'm like, for better or worse, I was raised by parents who didn't believe that the government was interested in their well-being, that the police weren't, that the teachers weren't, that the doctors weren't. Like, that's how I grew up. That was the beginning context of my life was in a space where, and it was absolutely true for them, where in their experience, it
Yeah.
was absolutely true that like anyone in a mainstream institution did not serve their needs. And so I
Wow.
think that like I can I can also like kind of be have a more complex and full comprehension of that. And obviously now I don't think that way. But I think that I don't have the expectation of service. I don't have the expectation like that this place that maybe doesn't have the infrastructure to serve me is going to serve me in a particular way. So it's got to be people. It's got
Yeah.
to be me loving other people and them loving me.
I love that. Absolutely. And in that love,
Mhm.
um, you talk about like just integrating poetry in all art forms, like
Yeah.
with culinary arts, and we've
Mhm.
talked about like photography and paintings.
Mhm.
Um, why is it one important for you to bring
Mhm.
those multiple arts together? Is it so that
Mhm.
um, you have multiple types of people,
Mm.
or is it just, the way that your creative brain works?
Mm.
But what do you think happens when poetry and these other forms meet for those that are experiencing it?
I think it's a good question. I think that like so when I look back even 100 years is not that far back, but I look back 100 years and I think about like Black creatives.
Mhm.
They did everything. They painted, they had a little op libretto, they had a, collection, a novel, a collection of poems, like they
Mm,
dabbled in this, dabbled in that. They might have tried to be a little, a little jazz musician over here. So like the idea that like we only engage in one art form to me feels very capitalistic. It feels
wow.
very like
Okay.
your genre, you do your one thing
Mm-hmm.
so that like I know how to place you and I know how to sell to you and I know how to what brand you are. And I think that like we don't experience anything in that way. Like,
Right.
if I'm reading a poem, you see how I'm dressed, you see what the lights look like. You might have like you smell the room. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's a holistic experience. Like so the idea that the visual and the oral and like all of those pieces are tied together in how we move through the world. And so I think that like for me, like my natural response to a work of art is to honor it with poetry. Like I
Yeah.
want to remember it and I want to draw other people to it. And the craft that I've honed the most is poems. So I just feel like that feels like a really natural, cyclical, like dynamic engagement. But I believe in, I do believe in like there's this in grad school I did a I don't know why I took a philosophy class. I was confused the whole time. But one of the things that stood out to me is there's this philosopher who talks about art and one thing that always echoes to me from his writing is that he talks about art as being useless. Like art can't have a function in society. Like art is not a spoon, like art is not a toaster. Art
Right.
is something that you put on your wall and you can't
Mm-hmm.
turn it into anything. You can't like cover yourself up with it. You can't eat it. You
Wow.
can't, but like, and that's why it means something. Like, why would we take this useless thing that's just like paint on a canvas and pay $1 million for it?
Right.
What is it
It
about
does
that
something.
thing? What does it do? There's something inside of us. There's something in our spirit, in our soul, in our heart that is
Mm.
moved by that. It's not about the function of our bodies. It's not about like pure like shelter, food. Like it's not about
Yeah.
those necessities. It's something that's not necessary to us. And so when we draw those things that are not necessary to us closer, we acknowledge that we're not just here to like
Mm.
survive. And so
Yeah.
I think that like all the arts give us that. So like when I see a play or I see a musical or I see a piece of art or a sculpture or wonderful food, like I'm like this tells me that I'm not just here to survive. I mean, I could
Mm.
have like bread and, beans every day, like, but I'm not here to just survive.
Right.
There's something bigger than that, and it speaks to my spirit and my soul, and like there's like a sort of sacred elevation, I think, too, to say that like I'm not just like this earthbound being, right? Not to get too
Wow.
like,
Yeah.
metaphysical, but like I'm
No,
a
you're
spiritual
good.
being. Like
Yeah.
I'm a being that like exists on, not just the physical plane. So I think that like art speaks to that to me,
Mm-hmm.
like
It
all
does.
art forms
Absolutely.
like speaks to me in that way.
Yeah. I think when we first started doing the Fifth Woman, that was kind of, what I wanted. It almost like a good plate of food, like
Mm,
you have to have a little bit of everything on that plate of food. And so
yeah.
I wanted poetry and dance and lights and,
Hmm.
the theatrical and
Hmm.
music all in here, creating these moments that people would never forget. But
Yeah.
also telling, the story of women and
Yeah.
the women that were in my life. So,
Yeah. I love that.
all right, I have kept you with us long enough. So can we have one more point?
Sure. Okay, so I'm gonna read this poem is kind of like a so there's this poem in my next kind of group of poems is about Cinderella. So thinking about Cinderella as this like figure frame that we kind of enter and all the usefulness. And so this is a poem where she sends her godmother away, and so she doesn't actually try to go on this journey outside of her, sort of lot. Like she has become what they have said about her. And so that's just kind of the poem that came out of that. Cinderella sends her godmother away. I will never leave this house. How I hated the company of women and called my sisters wicked when they tied down my restless hands with work, when they licked me with their curses. But, keeper, all names are curses. You know how my body arches for the faithful, brutal touch of almost family, how the skin hollers to be rubbed quiet with hurting. Don't send your chariot. Let me slip back into muddy dark. Let midnight expose a dirt-born, square-toed monster from which all pure hands shrink back. So that's Cinderella in her lowest moment. Before that's her.
In the lowest of low moments. Oh
It's
my
a
goodness.
hard day, hard night.
Hey, we all have those,
That's right.
right?
Uh-huh.
But there's always some sunlight that'll peek through.
That's right.
Um,
Understand.
so for those who are trying to navigate this space, and want to, you know, kind of follow in your footsteps of
Mm,
not only being an academic, but also being in the community. Um,
mhm,
what advice do you have about walking that tightrope and
mhm,
allowing yourself to bend and break in both
mhm.
places?
Ooh, higher education is hard right now. It
Mhm.
really is a hard place. Um, I'll say this for myself, because I never imagined myself as being a professor or being in higher ed. It wasn't like a career that I saw and then I reached to attain.
Mm,
Um, but I've always been a teacher. Like I've always because I've saw the value of grades in education when I was very young. I mean, to me, going from having many people in my family who couldn't read, I mean, and write, like not more than, you don't have to go back too many generations. So like this idea of like being able to get a credential that validates you beyond what other people can say was very
mhm.
appealing to me, coming
Wow.
from a place where like you need validation, right?
Mhm.
So it is a model that's a little unsettling from the outset to
Mhm.
say like because I also in that same it's a long answer to a short question. I also in that same experience like I looked around in my PhD program and I was like how did y'all get in here? Like, what are we doing here? Like, why are there so many people who I know who couldn't get in this program or who couldn't get into, or felt like
Mm,
they couldn't get into grad school or felt like a PhD is like some like distant horizon. And I look around and I'm like, no, this one and that one, everyone I know, we could have all been in here,
yeah.
so like,
Mhm.
that feeling of saying you really can't make the credential more than you can't make it bigger than it is or lower than it is. I think that that's
Got you.
kind of the
Okay.
piece. Like it's not like I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're a doctor. That must mean da 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 da." And I'm like, "Yeah, for me it was hard and I did a lot of work and I did, it meant this for me. But just by itself, it doesn't mean anything." And so I would
Okay.
never like walk into a room and assume that my credential is what makes me valuable. It's
Mm,
like I assume that like for me, the most important thing is having a tangible, positive impact on the people around me.
Yeah.
That's just, it just is. Like, I'm like, if I'm not doing that, what's the point? Who
Right.
cares? And I think that if you continue to try to make yourself a little better every day, like think about the things you care about and love and try to take care of them. Take care of yourself because we don't take care of ourselves.
We
We
don't.
really don't. Like, just like take care of yourself. Think about that as also part of a revolution. Get
Mm-hmm.
your sleep, you know. Don't ignore your
That's the
high blood
hard one
pressure.
right there.
Don't ignore heart disease and diabetes. Like, eat better. Like, all of
Yes,
the
yes.
things, like, do those things. Like, it's not outside of this conversation. Um, and eventually, like, you will get better and
Mm-hmm.
you will make your way. I
Yeah.
think that there's a lot of things in this world that make us feel like no matter how much we do, we won't be accepted. And that's a lie.
Wow.
It's a
Yeah.
lie. It's a
Yeah.
lie. And that
Yeah.
keeps us from the work. That lie keeps us from the work. There's nobody out here reading a book of poems every day before they go to bed who is not going to be great.
Wow.
Like, you're not, no matter, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you come from, where you started. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
will be great because
Yeah.
it's not magic. And that's what I think people are afraid. They're afraid that, like, they don't have enough talent. They didn't come from the
That's
right
it.
family. They
Mm-hmm.
didn't, like, they're already,
Yeah.
doomed.
Yeah.
And it's like there's work we know. It's just like here's what I'm speaking to myself. Like, it's also like there is work out here that we know to do that will make us better. That we have to
Mm-hmm.
trust ourselves, trust the work, trust the process.
And
Like, and
begin
I
with a
think that,
failed
like,
body.
begin. Like, you're
We
not
got
there
there.
yet, but
Yes.
just begin. I think that that's
Just
the piece. And
begin.
reach out. Like, I'm sincere about the belief that, like, if there's anything I can ever do, if I can ever be of service, be in contact with people, have a conversation with somebody, help them in any, like, practical sort of meaningful way. Some of the things I talk about might feel like a little in the sky, but, like, a practical thing, like, submit every other week. If you're not submitting, submit twice a month, okay? Because you want to get in the practice of it. It doesn't hurt you. It doesn't
It
hurt you to
doesn't, it
submit.
doesn't hurt. Okay.
Um,
I'm listening. I'm listening. I'm taking it
okay,
in. I'm taking
okay.
it in. I'm gonna try.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Graham, Natalie, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your
Thank you.
words, your wisdom, and your work with our community. It was truly enriching.
Thank you so
Um,
much. I appreciate the time.
Everybody, you've been listening to another episode of First Sundays with Black Poet Laureates. To learn more about Dr. Natalie Graham, find links to their books and upcoming readings and social media in our show notes. The National Black Poet Laureate Society is launching our website in 2026, and you'll be able to explore our directory of Black Poet Laureates and learn about our upcoming conference and pre-order volume 2 of In Fullness of the Word, an anthology of Black Poet Laureates in the United States. Visit us at blackpoetlaureates.com and follow us on Facebook. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with fellow poetry lovers. Join us on the first Sunday of every month as we continue to celebrate the brilliance of Black Poet Laureates across this nation. Until next time, keep the words flowing and the legacy growing.